It's going to be amazing to give him challah.
Bezat Hashem. No, I hear the idea. Bezat Hashem, today in Masechet Shabbat, we're starting the top of Membet Amud Aleph, 42a, top of the page, Lememra. We're going to have two sections in today's learning. The first, we're going to clarify exactly what is Shmuel's opinion legabe melacha she'ena tzricha legufa and davar she'eno mitkaven. We'll see. In the second section, we're going to discuss exactly what is the halacha, at least here, Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai, different shitot, legabe kli rishon and kli sheini. This gets a little bit technical. B'ezat Hashem, we'll make a chart. We'll get it clear. The different shitot, when are you allowed to add cold water, not allowed to add cold water, and then we'll see B'ezat Hashem at the bottom, some sort of a psak. Okay, so Chaver, let's just remember where we're holding here. Yesterday, we had a machloket, Rav and Shmuel, that we finished off with. Remember? Yeah. Rav and Shmuel. Yeah. Remember? When we said Rav and Shmuel both follow Rav Bar Matna, which means if you have a kli, a kettle on the fire, a kumkum, like you could say like a metal, but it's metal, a metal kli on the fire, you take it off the fire. Rav Bar Matna said you spilled it out, and now you want to add cold water to the vessel. So you said like this. What's that? Rav Bar Matna is an Amora. Okay. Usually, if it's Rav, it's Amora. If it's Rebbe, it's Tana. Usually, that's the rule. That's the usual rule. So we had like this. He said that the case of the Mishnah, back on Mem Aleph and Amud Aleph, was you took the metal pot off the fire, you spilled it out, and now it's hot. Yad soledet bo. So Rav Bar Matna said, in such a case, the Mishnah says there's a chiluk if you add a little bit, a lot of water, v'chulei. Fine. Rav and Shmuel both agreed with Rav Bar Matna. The argument they had was, can you add cold water to the top? What's the machloket? So Rav held, so it's davar she'eno mitkaven, but what's the davar she'eno mitkaven? Because it's mitaken maneh. How's it mitaken maneh? You fill it up with water, it's mitzaref, it hardens the kli. Rav says it's asur, Shmuel says mutar. Why does Shmuel say mutar? Because Shmuel holds davar she'eno mitkaven is mutar like Rabbi Shimon. Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda, davar she'eno mitkaven is asur. Just to remember again, what is davar she'eno mitkaven?
You're not sure he's going to complete the melacha or not. You're not sure.
You're doing an action that might be asur.
Might be.
You don't know if it will be. So Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon, mutar, and Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda, asur.
Rabbi, 1 second, but if you fill up all the way, it's going to be mitaken, no? It's for sure.
Not for sure.
Not for sure?
Not for sure. Okay. Not for sure. Why not? So let's just put
like
that down.
Strong material, it's not going to, it's not sure that it's going to melt.
No, we come from תחילה במחשבה, שאתה מוריד אותו, הוא is ready to be מתקן if you fill up all the way the water. Otherwise, there's no question. Or maybe not. Maybe it's not so hard.
אבל זה בדיוק הדבר שלנו. הוא לא בטוח שזה יקרה.
זהו.
So Shmuel holds.
אתה גם צריך באמת לרתח את זה, אתה יודע,
לא, זה מה שאמרתי אתמול, זה לא ככה, זה לא ממש ככה.
חבר'ה, look at this.
עצם עוד שיושב על החום שמה, זה כבר נהיה כזה... כן, ככה הבנתי זה לא... אני גם חשבתי בהתחלה שצריך להיות חום של... לא. אפילו חום שהוא... חום גבוה, כן?
Remember the idea of מלאכה שאינה צריכה לגופה. Okay, let's not get confused over here.
כן.
What's the concept of מלאכה שאינה צריכה לגופה?
מה שמתן אמר, אתה גורר bench, you're making hole for sure, but I have no interest about this גומה or whatever.
But the מלאכה שאינה צריכה לגופה can cause דבר שאינו מתכוון.
So look, we have to get clear this chiluk before we see this next piece.
דבר שאינו מתכוון, you know,
מלאכה שאינה צריכה לגופה is like this. In the Mishkan, there were these 39 melachot that were done, and from that we learn what's asur on Shabbat. Melacha shetzricha legufa means you're doing it either, this is a machloket in the rishonim, but Tosfot learns it means you're doing it for the same accomplishment that was done in the Mishkan. Right? Remember, let's just give an example. Okay. Remember the case we said, oseh pecham. Okay. You're putting out the fire to make a coal. Okay. If that's your kavanah, that's tzricha legufa.
Yeah.
If you're putting it out for a different reason, let's say, kechas al haner, so that's melacha she'ena tzricha legufa. Now, Tosfot learns that what does it mean? It means you're putting it out not for the intended purpose. It's the same action of putting out the fire, but it's not for the same intention, the same kavanah like it was done in the Mishkan. Rashi is a little bit of a more inclusive. He says it's not a productive purpose. It's just to remove a problem. One of the examples we spoke about is if you're moving the dead body out of the house, hamit, outside, not because you want to move it from reshut ha'echid to reshut ha'rabim, you just don't want it in the house. So Rashi learns that's the idea melacha she'ena tzricha legufa. It means it's not productive, it's not accomplishing, it's just to remove a problem. So now we had a machloket in this. We had a machloket Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon in this as well. Rabbi Yehuda said melacha she'ena tzricha legufa, even though your intention is not for the same purpose or it's not a productive purpose, that's not your intention, but the action is the same action and it's asur d'oraita. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda held it's asur d'oraita. And Rabbi Shimon held it is mutar. Now it's actually
mutar val asur.
Mutar val asur, meaning patur val asur.
Patur val asur. So why is it mutar?
It's you're right. It's patur val asur. It's asur d'oraita.
The machloket with Ula and
patur aval
asur.
Asur means it's asur d'rabanan. You're not chayav midoraita. Okay, fine. So now the Gemara is going to show that it appears Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Yehuda לגבי מלאכה שאינה צריכה לגופה.
מחילה, אם אמרנו, אם אתה אומר שזה לפי רבי יהודה זה אסור, הבנתי.
כן.
ורבי שמעון...
חייב מדאורייתא, אבל זה חייב,
חייב. רגע, אז... רגע, אז לא הבנתי, אז אם אני... לא, זה אותו דבר אם אני גורד הבנץ' ועושה הול?
No, that's something else. That's דבר שלא מכוון. Sorry, let's not confuse it. What we're about to show is that Shmuel seems to paskin like Rabbi Yehuda לגבי the rule of מלאכה שאינה צריכה לגופה. So the Gemara is going to ask it as a stira. How can you tell me Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Shimon legabe davar she'eno mitkaven if he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda legabe melacha she'ena tzricha legufa?
It's two different things.
Okay, so that's going to be Tosfot doesn't even understand the question because it seems to be two different issues. But let's read the question inside. So the case that we're going to discuss here is like this. There's some sort of a hezek in the reshut harabim, a damaging thing on Shabbat. Something that's very hot. Okay? Oh, so it's hezek for reshut harabim. Okay. So the yesod that we're going to show is if it's only in a issurei derabanan, you're allowed to get rid of it so that people don't get hurt. Because hezek harabim, you want to prevent that, you're allowed to get rid of it. Now the example we're going to say is like this. If you have a hot piece of metal, so to put out the heat of a hot piece of metal, that's not the melacha that was done in the Mishkan. Because what was the melacha in the Mishkan? It was to put out the heat on wood to make it into a coal so that the next time it lights better. That was the kibui, that was the mechabeh that was done in the Mishkan. It's to put out a piece of wood that was heated up, make it into a coal so that it heats up, it lights better next time. You don't make a coal out of metal. So memela, to put out the heat of a hot piece of metal in the reshut harabim in the public, you're allowed to do that. To put out a piece of wood that's very hot in reshut harabim, that's going to be asur, even though hezek harabim. Why is it asur? Because Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Yehuda that even though your intention is just to remove hezek harabim and not to make a kol out of it, but since the action you're doing makes a kol, so that's considered melacha she'ena tzricha legufa. To do an issurei d'oraita you're not allowed to do to avoid hezek harabim. Only to do something that's issurei d'rabanan you're allowed to do.
So why? So if it doesn't get hurt.
That's a different story. But the point we're going to say over here is like this. Shmuel seems to paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that where it's melacha she'ena tzricha legufa, it's chayav, it's asur d'oraita, v'haraya, because he says if that's in the reshut harabim, the wood, you're not allowed to put it out, despite hezek harabim. So the kasha is going to be, how could he paskin by melacha she'ena tzricha legufa like Rabbi Yehuda, if by davar she'eno mitkaven he paskins like Rabbi Shimon? Let's read it inside now. Very interesting psak. Let's see. Lememra, it's a top men betem with aleph. Lememra, this would imply to Shmuel Rabbi Shimon tzvir alei. That Shmuel holds legabe davar she'eno mitkaven. You can fill the kli up to the top, even though it might be mitzarif. That's not your intention. It might not happen. That's not your intention, and therefore davar she'eno mitkaven is mutar like Rabbi Shimon. The problem is v'hamar Shmuel, but Shmuel himself says. Mechabin gachelet shel matechet b'reshut harabim. You are allowed to put out the heat of a gachelet shel matechet. It's a coal of metal. Now, there's no such thing really as a coal of metal. It means a hot piece of metal. It's going to cause hezek in reshut harabim. That you're allowed to do. B'shvil shelo yizoku barabim, so that people don't get hurt. Now, why are you allowed to do that? Because that's not isur deoraita. That's not like the avodah that was done in the Mishkan. You don't make a kol out of metal. So memela, that would be mutar. It would be at most an isur derabanan. You can override an isur derabanan to prevent hezek rabim. But you're not allowed to put out a hot piece of wood that's in the Rishut Harabim, even to prevent. Why? Because that would be an isur deoraita. Why is it an isur deoraita? Because Shmuel passes like Rabbi Yehuda that even though your intention is not like the purpose to make a kol, or like Rashi learned, for a productive purpose, you're just trying to remove a problem, nonetheless, since it's an isur deoraita, you're not allowed to do that. So it seems, says the Gemara, but if Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon, so even to put out the piece of wood should be allowed, because he holds it's patur, it's only chiyuv derabanan, so it must be paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore, says the Gemara, it seems to be a stira. On one hand, Shmuel paskins by davar sheino mitkaven like Rabbi Shimon, but in regards to melacha she'ena tzricha legufa, he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda.
But here is the oraita, here is the derabanan, it's the oraita. We said to you explain the whole mahalach, because if it's something is a hot metal, that's not the melacha they do in Bet HaMikdash. Bet HaMikdash was turned the heads, extreme niche to make it to get. But here, this is really the oraita.
No, but again, according to Rabbi Shimon, it's only patu aval asur. If you hold like Rabbi Shimon, you could put out that wood in the Rishut Harabim also. It's only to
extinguish the...
You could. It must be he holds like Rabbi Yehuda that it's a chiyuv deoraita. That's the point.
Where's Rabbi Shimon?
We have a machloket. We spoke about this many times. Melacha she'ena tzricha legufa.
Rabbi Yehuda oser.
It means you're not doing it, let's say like Rashi, for a productive purpose. You're just doing to remove some sort of a problem.
Yes.
Rabbi Shimon holds patur aval asur. It means it's only a chiyuv derabanan. According to Rabbi Shimon, you're allowed to put out that coal that's in the Rishut Harabim. And yet Shmuel says it's asur. Why does Shmuel say it's asur? Because he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, who says it's a chiyuv deoraita. Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold that way. So clearly, Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Yehuda legabe this halacha, and like Rabbi Shimon legabe davar she'eno mitkaven.
And how are we doing the chiluk?
1 second, but everybody here we just showed is Shmuel seems to be paskining like Rabbi Shimon legabe the halacha of davar she'eno mitkaven, in the case you fill up the water. But he also paskins like melacha she'ena tzricha legufa.
But it's also melacha she'ena tzricha legufa.
Like Rabbi Yehuda and not like Rabbi Shimon. That's what we just showed. So the kasha is, it seems to be inconsistent. It doesn't seem to be that he's following his own train of thought.
There is two different comparison here. Lemalot akli. You're filling up the kumkum.
You're not sure it's going to be any melacha. That's different.
You're doing here melacha.
Here you know it's going to be melacha. Not the oraita, but it's going to be melacha. Here, it's going to be maybe yes, maybe not. It's different.
Okay, I hear that. I hear what you're saying. Okay, I can hear that. So the Gemara says that's why Tosfot doesn't really understand the question here, because Tosfot says, how are you asking Akasha? These are two different types of halachot. When it comes to Melechet Shabbat, you can't necessarily compare. Davar she'eno mitkaven is not the same thing as Melacha she'ena tzricha legufa. So the Gemara therefore answers very simple. Davar she'en mitkaven savar la Rabbi Shimon. In regards to davar she'eno mitkaven, Rabbi Shimon, Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon that it's mutar, and that's why you can fill up the kli. But melacha she'ena tzricha legufa, and the other area of halacha, melacha she'ena tzricha legufa, you're not doing it for productive purpose. Savar la Rabbi Yehuda, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, so you can't compare one to the other.
Of course, because here's melacha. I'm doing melacha for sure. I'm not tzricha legufa, but it's melacha.
I hear. No, but I hear the chiluk you're saying. I hear.
It's very, זה נראה מאוד ממש ברור.
יש פה סיכוי שגם לא יקרה.
בדבר שלא מתכוון. אני לא יודע, אולי כן אולי. פה אני עושה מלאכה 100%.
What Yochai is saying is, even according to Rabbi Shimon, במלאכה שאינה צריכה לגופה, there is פטור אבל אסור. There is a דרבנן.
אבל דבר שאינו מתכוון, it might not happen.
It might not happen, exactly.
There is a possibility.
So it makes sense why Shmuel would be lenient by davar she'eno mitkaven, by davar she'eno mitkaven, and machmir when it comes to
you taking the bench. Not sure that there is a melacha here.
Yeah, let's continue. So B'kitzur, what we're saying over here is...
But I see something very nice that give me a true answer to my say. How come it's if you have gachel tirshut harabim, gachelet shel etz, it's okay to leave it. Why? He said because gachelet shel etz היא בוערת אדומה, so people is warning, people be careful. When it's a hot metal, nobody knows it's a hot metal, then they can get the metal.
I hear. Probably he was trying to avoid is if it's a sakanat nefashot, of course you have to move it. So he's saying no, people will realize.
בגחלת שהיא אדומה, אז אנשים רואים זה, be careful, but when it's a hot metal,
you don't necessarily see.
You know that there's a cook. Many times you're holding a spoon, it's
burn your hand, right?
Yes, you don't see it's
let's finish up here. So what we're saying is, now just this wraps up this final point here. What we're saying is, if there's some sort of a item in the Reshut HaRabim that's Hezek Rabim, that's going to damage people, to do an Isur D'Rabanan, you're allowed. To do an Isur D'Oraita, you're not allowed. So Avina says, Ilkach, therefore, Kotz B'Reshut HaRabim, if there's a thorn, you have like a piece of glass, something sharp, it's dangerous. Molicho pachot pachot me'arba amot. So what you're allowed to do is, you can't carry it outright, because that's an Isur D'Oraita, 4 amot B'Reshut HaRabim. You can carry it less than 4 amot, stop, pick it up again, carry another, no, you're not allowed to carry 4 amot B'Reshut, asur letaltel 4 amot B'Reshut HaRabim. So you do akira, you walk 3 amot, stop, another 3 amot, stop, etc. And then you're only over, so that's a Isur D'Rabanan, but that you're allowed to do to avoid Hezek LeRabim.
אבל מותר או פטור אבל אסור?
No, mutar. Because you need to get rid of the hezek, but you can't do it in a way that's asur d'oraita. So you stop every 3 amot. That would be
no problem
asur d'rabanan. Not, I guess if you show you're holding a piece of glass, some people understand. Over Carmelit. Now, in regards to Carmelit we spoke about is a location that's not really Reshut HaRabim, but we give it chumrot. So there, afilu tuva, even to walk more than 4 amot, since the whole Isser of Tiltul in Carmelit is D'Rabanan, so Bichlal, you could just take it and walk in the Carmelit, because that wouldn't be Isser D'Oraita. We spoke about before, what is Carmelit exactly? Reshut HaRabim needs to be 16 amot, Carmelit is something less than that, 600,000 people, B'chulei. But the point is, if it's only Isser D'Rabanan, you can even walk Legamri, no problem. Okay, let's move on.
What do you say the Carmelit?
Yeah.
From the Carmelit to something else?
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, theoretically. The Yesod is, if it's an Isur D'Rabanan, to prevent Hezek L'Rabim is mutar. If it's Isur D'Oraita, you're not allowed to do. So you have to try to prevent the Isur D'Oraita and only do the Isur D'Rabanan to prevent the Hezek.
I cannot degachelet etz and carry that for amot stop.
Carry it. Interesting to carry it. Because we were saying to be mechabeh. To carry, I don't know if you could. I guess you take some sort of, maybe you could, and a chanami.
But
take some sort of a dangerous thing.
The problem here, I think so, when you put with the gachelet, you move it, it's the fire, it's different.
It's more dangerous, maybe.
No, it's more mavir, zuzah.
Maybe you're putting out the fire, and that would be the issue. Maybe you can't even touch it.
You can't even touch it.
Unless you could be mechabeh. If you're not allowed to be mechabeh, I hear. Okay, one second, I just need a tissue.
I'm going to get some.
Sit. Yeah, let's go. I want to go. This next point. This is the next presentation. Okay, let's go. Okay, now we're going to talk about Kli Rishon and Kli Sheini. What is Kli Rishon? Where you have a vessel that was on the fire, right? You have a Kli that was on the fire. There's a tablet that's going to fall. Maybe push it over. So you have a Kli that was on the fire and it was heated up to more than Yad Solet Bo. Now this is called the Kli Rishon. You take that off the fire, what happens to that Kli?
You take it off the fire.
Let's just assume, so long as it's still Yad Solet Bo, let's just assume, it's still very hot that the hand recoils, pulls back. That's still considered Kli Rishon. Okay? To put food into that, l'chaura is asur.
I need this carton if you don't mind.
What is Kli Sheini? What is Kli Sheini?
I need the carton if you don't mind. I need the box. This one, yes, take it.
What is Kli Sheini? Kli Sheini. So if you take from the Kli Rishon, you pour the contents into another Kli, that would be Kli Sheini. Now what's the halacha bishul for Kli Sheini? So let's see. This is going to be a machloket Bet Shammai Beit Hillel. That's what we're going to get to now. And there's going to be a chiluk that we draw. Listen to the chiluk. If you're pouring cham letoch tzonen, or tzonen letoch cham? Are you pouring something cold into something hot, or something hot into something cold? Okay, that's going to be a chiluk that we're about to make. Rashi understands this is based on a yesod, which is called tata'a gavar. Tata'a. Heilige Tate. Tata'a gavar. No, it's not like the Tata'a means atachton, gavar means hagover. Is that whatever the temperature of the item on bottom is, it takes over.
He's going to win.
It overcomes whatever's being put on top. So the yesod would then be, if I'm pouring tzonen into something that's cham, there is a problem of bishul.
The tzonen will get hot.
Because
but if I'm putting cham to tzonen,
that wouldn't necessarily be a problem, because we'll say the coolness of the item on bottom overpowers the heat that comes in from top, so it's not bishul.
But
now,
that depends by the measurement.
Tosfot doesn't agree with Rashi, but we're going to go with the way Rashi learns.
But what's the difference? We said imesh mayim mu'atim, like in the kumkum.
Excellent. So Tosfot learns that this is more contingent on the majority. No. The thing on the bottom is the majority, but let's just stick with Rashi for now. Tanu Abanan. So Avanoten. So we said in the Mishnah, you're allowed to put something into a kos sheini. That's what we had said in the Mishnah when you take it off the fire. So Tanu Abanan, let's see. The Braita explains like this. Now let's learn the Braita. We have 3 shitot, and we're going to have 2 ways of learning the machloket bezat Hashem. Says the Braita. Noten Adam, now pay attention to the details here. Noten Adam chamin letoch hatzonen. You're allowed to put hot liquid or hot food into cold. You're pouring hot water into cold water. Velo hatzonen letoch hachamin. But you're not allowed to put cold into hot. Divrei Beit Shammai. This is the opinion of Beit Shammai. Now Tosfot explains like this. Let's get this very clear. Beit Shammai does not make a chiluk if it's kli rishon or kli sheini. Bichlal, the yesod according to Beit Shammai is you could put hot water into cold water, but not cold water into hot water.
You can put hot.
Now what's the pshat? Exactly. What's the pshat? Means Beit Shammai says like this. What's the pshat? So Beit Shammai says like this. Kli rishon or kli sheini. Beit Shammai's opinion is cham letoch tzonen
mutar.
But avalo
tzonen letoch cham.
Tzonen letoch cham. Now why? What's the pshat? So he says like this. If it's a kli rishon, to put tzonen letoch cham would be a problem of bishul. There's a gzeira that we extend that also to the case of cham letoch tzonen, tzonen letoch cham even by a kli sheini. This is what Tosfot explains. You're not allowed to put tzonen letoch cham by kli rishon. That's a bishul problem. You're also not allowed to put tzonen letoch cham by kli sheini according to Beit Shammai, which is a gzeira. Gzeira says that you can't put it by kli sheini etu kli rishon, so you don't end up putting it in kli rishon. Now, it also goes the kula. You're allowed to put cham letoch tzonen. You're allowed to put cham letoch tzonen, not only by kli sheini, but also by kli rishon, because cham letoch tzonen, tata'a gavar, that's how Rashi explains, and it's not going to be a bishul. So Beit Shammai says, across the board, it's the same yesod, which is, cham letoch tzonen is mutar, tzonen letoch cham is asur. That's the opinion of Beit Shammai. Let's continue.
Let's say I have 50-50. Okay. Cold, hot. 2 cups. 2 cups. Okay. If I pour the hot to cold.
So if you go like Rashi, we're going to learn
mutar. If I put the cold to the hot,
exactly.
So
tata'a gavar. The yesod of tata'a gavar means whatever the temperature of the bottom item is, it heats up the top item or cools down the top item. And that overpowers. Continues
the outcome of it's going to be the same thing.
Let's see. Beit Hillel omrim, Beit Hillel say, ben chamin letoch hatzonen, whether it's chamin letoch hatzonen, or ben tzonen letoch hachamin, or if the cold is going into the hot, mutar, it is permitted. Now, the Braita itself clarifies, Bameh devarim amurim, when does Beit Hillel say you're even allowed to put tzonen into chamin? It's because, kos means kos sheini, it's a kli sheini. Is if it's kli sheini, so then Beit Hillel says you could put tzonen into chamin as well. Aval be'ambati, now ambati is a bathtub, but ambati is a kli rishon. It means either you heated up the water in that bathtub, or it's like chamei teveria. But either way, you learn that ambati is a kli rishon. By a kli rishon, chamin letoch hatzonen, it is permitted to put chamin into tzonen, velo tzonen letoch hachamin, but not tzonen letoch hachamin. Now, The way we're understanding Beit Hillel at face value is that Beit Hillel is saying like this. If it's kli sheini, afilu sonen letoch chamin. That's what Beit Hillel would hold.
Because.
Kli sheini.
I'm saying because.
Kli sheini. That's what kos is. Kli sheini.
אבל
Kos means kli sheini. That's what it means. It means you took from the original thing and put it in a cup. No, it's the same thing. Kli rishon, however, Beit Hillel says that you're not allowed to put sonen letoch chamin. You're not allowed to. So in terms of kli rishon, Beit Hillel says mutar rak
cham letzonen.
Cham letoch sonen. Okay, that's where. So let's just so far what we have here is like this. Beit Shammai says a yesod across the board. You're not allowed to put sonen letoch chamin. You are allowed to put chamin letoch sonen.
Lo bekos, lo be'ambati.
Both kli rishon, kli sheni. Beit Hillel says that no, by kli sheni we're more lenient than what you're saying. Kli sheni, we don't make that gezerah. It's true. By kli rishon you can't put sonen letoch chamin. By kli sheni we don't extend the gezerah, and you could put sonen letoch chamin. In terms of kli rishon, we agree with you. You are allowed to put chamin letoch tzonen. You're not allowed to put tzonen letoch chamin. Okay?
Let's say I have water here in Shabbat that is cooking. I'm allowed to add hot water to cold water inside of the kumkum or whatever?
Hot water to cold water. That's, again, I guess that would come out like these shitot. Let's continue here. Fine, good. So far, so good. Now, the third shita in the Braita is Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. Let's see. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya oser. Now, the Braita says Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya oser. He says it is asur. What is asur? What is asur? What is he b'pashtut? What is he talking about? So you'd say he's referring to the last thing that Beit Hillel said. So what was the last thing that Beit Hillel said? The last thing he said was, so what did Beit Hillel say? If it's a kli rishon, this is the end of the words of Beit Hillel, that you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin, but you are allowed to add chamin letoch tzonen. So the simple pshat is, what is Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya saying?
That is asur.
That what's asur?
Asur to add chamin letoch tzonen.
It sounds like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya
Machmir.
Is being machmir where? By kli rishon. By kli rishon, what is he saying? Afilu asur chamin letoch tzonen. Right? That would be the simple way to read the Braita. Everybody see that? He's falling off of the last words of Beit Hillel. So it would appear what he's saying is, you're not even allowed to add chamin letoch tzonen when it comes to a kli rishon. That's what it seems to be, is being machmir on that. Let's just keep that in mind. Even in the kli rishon, the ambati, the bathtub, exactly. Yeah. Let's continue. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman, that's the end of the Braita. Rav Nachman, Amora, he paskins, halacha ka Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. Halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. Now, what would that mean practically? He's the most machmir shita.
That you cannot add chamin letoch tzonen bekli rishon.
You can't even add chamin letoch tzonen by kli rishon, by ambatia, the kli rishon. That's what would seem to come out. So just to clarify, we have three shitot here. Beit Shammai says the rule across the board is you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin. You could add chamin letoch tzonen. That's the rule according to Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel says we're more lenient by kli sheini. You could add tzonen letoch chamin. There's no gzera. But by kli rishon, we'll agree with you. You're only allowed to add chamin letoch tzonen. And Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya seems to come along and he's being machmir. Even by kli rishon, you're not even allowed to add chamin letoch tzonen. And Rav Nachman paskins like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, the most machmir. Okay, good.
But probably because the majority of the tzonen, the bottom of the tzonen is very little, and the chamin is like 3/4 of chamin.
What you're adding?
Yes.
Okay, so Tosfot goes out of his way to say, not like the pshat I said about Tata Gavar, he says you could always assume whatever is inside the kli before is the majority.
You can assume.
That's how he learns pshat in this sugya. We're going to leave that out, but in Kitzur, that's what he says. Fine. So now let's continue. Pay attention here, Chevra.
Let's
say it's Yatzolet. It's very hot. Savar Rav Yosef lemeimar. Now listen, Rav Yosef thought to say, he thought the psak would be sefel harehu ke'ambati. That a sefel is like an ambati. Maza sefel? Sefel is a wash basin. It's a bucket you take to wash yourself off with.
Sefel, it's not a cup?
It's like some sort of a bowl that you use to wash yourself. Okay. Now, how do you get water into the sefel? You take from the bathtub into the bowl, and then you wash your face, you wash your hands, etc. with it. Okay? So Rav Yosef thought, very interesting, Rav Yosef thought to say that the wash basin is like an ambati. I forgot to mention something. I want to tell you a very interesting thing Rashi points out over here. Rashi says, why is it that a kli sheini is different than a kli rishon? He says, because. So Rashi says like this, look at Bekos, look at Rashi. Rashi says, why are we more lenient? Because when you put water in the kos from the kli rishon, you want to drink. You don't want it to be so hot. It means you want it to cool down. And furthermore, the kli sheinihu. Seems to say two different things, but the point is, in the kos, it naturally will cool down, and you want it to cool down. So memela, that's why Beit Hillel is more lenient. He says you could put zon in the tochamin. But says Rav Yosef,
but how we can compare the sefel to a kli sheini?
So says Rav Yosef, because listen to the logic. Rav Yosef thought to say sefel, which is really a kli sheini, is the same as ambati, the bathtub. Why is that? Because the logic of kos is you want to drink it. When you drink it, it has to be cooled down. But when it comes to a chitza, you want to wash yourself with it. Actually, you want it to maintain its temperature to be hot. So therefore, Rav Yosef thought to say, sefel, actually, it's like the original ambati. You don't want it to cool down necessarily. That's how Rashi actually learns this. This is Rashi. Ho'il v'lav l'shtiya elo chitza asiri tenecha le'sheichamu arbei v'gazrinan. We should extend the gzeira because it's very similar to the ambati. Just as the ambati, where it's a warm temperature and you want it to be a warm temperature. So Rav Yosef says, logically, sefel, you also want it to be a warm temperature. So therefore, that should be dealt with not as a kli sheini, but actually it should be dealt with like a kli rishon. That's what Rav Yosef thought to say. Now he's about to be disproven, but that's what Rav Yosef thought to say. Rav Yosef thought sefel has the same logic as an ambati. Memela the halacha should be it's dealt with like kli rishon, not like kli sheini. Fine. Amar le Abaye, but Abaye turned to Rav Yosef, who was his Rebbe. Abaye said to his Rebbe, the problem with what you're saying is, I have a braita that clearly you're wrong. Because Tani Rabbi Chia taught in a braita, sefel eino k'ambati. Sefel is not like ambati. It's clearly against what you're saying. You thought sefel is like ambati. It says sefel, Rabbi Chia teaches us, sefel eino k'ambati. Ambati is kli rishon, sefel is kli sheini. You take it out into the sefel, into that bowl, it's a basin, it's considered a kli sheini. So now the Gemara turns back and says, okay, fine. So we know that the psak is sefel is a kli sheini. What the Gemara does now is it says, I don't even understand what Rav Yosef was saying mitchila. It's interesting, the Gemara will do this sometimes and say, Rav Yosef, whatever you were saying, it didn't even make sense in the first place without the braita.
It does make
without
sense.
Knowing Rav Chia, I'm going to show you, based on the psak we already said on Lamitet, what you're saying doesn't make sense. Let me just explain outside the kasha. Here what we're going to show is, Rav Yosef, what you're saying, it doesn't make sense based on what we learned earlier.
But it does make sense.
The psak on Lamitet Amud Bet, and the psak on Mem Amud Aleph, in a braita, according to Shmuel, was that on Shabbat, if water was warmed up before Shabbat, what's the halacha? Water was warmed up before Shabbat. What was the psak that we said?
Asu.
You're not allowed to take a bath, kol gufo, or a shower. Panav yadav raglav is mutar. That's what we said. Okay, now, let's go back to Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe.
But remember one thing.
But listen, there's a few steps here. Pay attention. Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe holds, what did he say in the braita? What did Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe say in the braita?
You can't add.
Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe oser. Now, what did he say is asur? So the simple way to understand is, even when it comes to kli rishon, Yochai, pay attention, it's complicated. Even when it comes to kli rishon, what's the halacha?
According to Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe, so
even chamin letoch tzonen is asur. Which means it comes out according to Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe and Rav Nachman Paskins like Rav Shimon ben Apsak halacha. What's the halacha? When you can't have any combination of warm and cold in a kli rishon. It's asur legamre. The kasha the Gemara is going to say is like this: Rav Yosef, lefi what you're saying in the Hava Amina, sefel areu ke'ambati, there's no case you could wash yourself panav yadav v'raglav from the sefel. Because you wouldn't wash yourself with just boiling water, you would burn yourself. So you would have had to combine some cold and hot water. But the way we understood Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya in the Braita is that he was saying, even to put chamin letoch tzonen in the kli rishon is going to be asur. So it must be sefer is not kli rishon, because otherwise, how do we have the allowance back on Lametet Amud Bet? We said panav yadav raglav is mutar. How could you have added kol tahar according to what you're saying? Must be. It's not kli rishon, and that's why you're allowed to combine them.
Maybe
you hear the stira?
Maybe
comes
just
out.
put it aside.
What do you mean?
If
put
you
it
take
aside?
off the water from the ambati, and you let them cold.
But if you let it cold, then what's the chidush? Of course.
Okay, don't let them cold.
Of course,
you can see how hot.
Of course, that's not kambati. Then he's saying it is kambati. So the kasha
ambati is for sure boiling.
It's boiling. It's kli rishon. But the kasha is we paskined earlier. You could wash panav yadav raglav. You wash it out of a sefel and you add water. That's the assumption the Gemara is going with, which the Gemara doesn't change. You have to add cold water. You're going to burn yourself otherwise. But if we paskin like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, and Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya means to say that kli rishon bichlal you can't add cold and hot together. So then how could you say sefer is kli rishon? You wouldn't be allowed to wash panav yadav raglav. It would be a stira. So you can't. It can't be like you're saying. Even if you don't have Rabbi Chia's Braita, it can't be, because otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to wash panav yadav raglav. So you would contradict the previous psak. So what's Rabbi Yosef's hava amina here? That's the kasha.
But Rabbi Yosef saying, remember one thing, that the person take water from
sefer
kli rishon with sefer, his intention is to use them while they're hot.
Correct.
It's not to drink it.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So it is like you're just basically pouring water directly from the ambati.
Yeah, but the problem is, if that's true, then there's no way you'd be allowed to wash panav yadav raglav on Shabbat.
Lama.
Because again, we assume that you put the water into the sefer, you don't wash directly from that, it will be too hot. So what you do is add some cold. Now, if that's kli rishon, you're not allowed to add cold, because we already said, Rishon ben Menasya says, you're not even allowed to put chamin letoch tzonen, and Rav Nachman says, that's the psak halacha. Yeah.
When you took from the ambati, it's
so
already kli sheini.
But Rabbi Yosef said that sefer areu ke'ambati.
No, you take from the ambati, with what? With the
sefer.
The
sefer.
You take from the sefer. The sefer is kli rishon.
So maybe it's also the opposite.
And then you put
it on yourself.
Oh, okay, fine. So you're saying you have a second cliche. I hear, but the Gemara understands you wash yourself directly from the sefer. The kasha the Gemara says is Rav Yosef's illogical, because even in his what he's originally saying without Rabbi Chia's Braita doesn't make sense.
Ambati is not something ambati is something you dip yourself and not taking a shower.
It doesn't sound logic.
Why?
So maybe it's also on the tzonen the tochamin, and not chamin to the tochamin.
But the problem is Rav Nachman said the psak is like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya.
But we don't say what's the psak.
Rav Nachman said the psak. Rav Nachman. Oh, okay, fine. So let's see. Let's see this inside. Let's see that kasha inside now. What entered your mind originally of Yosef? You said Sefer Areo Kambati, the Sefer Areo Kambati. Rav Nachman halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. But Rav Nachman said halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, and the way we understand Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya Oser, it means even in Kli Rishon you can't add chamin letoch tzonen. He's being machmir over Beit Hillel in the end of Beit Hillel's words. That even in Kli Rishon you can't warm it up with cold water in any way. It would come out that there's no way to wash. Rashi says panav yadav raglav on Shabbat, and we paskin Lametet Amud Bet in the Braita panav yadav raglav. You can use water shul chamul ifnei Shabbat. So it comes out that Rav Yosef illogical from the beginning. So the Gemara answers. Listen to the answer. The Gemara says, no, you're not understanding Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya properly. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya Oser. There's two ways to understand what he's saying. One way is like we said, is that Beit Hillel said you're allowed to add chamin letoch tzonen by kli rishon, and he's cholek. No, you're not allowed to add chamin letoch tzonen in kli rishon. That's what Rav Shimon ben Menasya was saying. That's not the pshat. The pshat is he's being cholek in regards to kli sheini. What do I mean? Is that Beit Hillel said in regards to kli sheini, what's the halacha? You're allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin. They don't make the gzera like Beit Shammai. On that, Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya is saying, we do make the gzera. And therefore you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch. So, that's going to be the kasha in a second. Very good. But what Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya in the Braita really is saying is, I agree with you. Like Beit Hillel, you can add chamin letoch tzonen, and that's how you can wash panav yadav raglav. Beautiful. Even though Sefel, in the end we said Sefel is not like Bambati, but you could have thought that it's fine. The Oser that Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya is saying is that, no, not like Beit Hillel that doesn't make a gzera. There is a gzera like Beit Shammai, which you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin by kli sheini. That's really what Shimon ben Menasya. And Rav Nachman's paskening like that. Let's read that inside. Mi saver to Rabbi Shimon as-seifa kai. You thought Rabbi Shimon's going on the seifa of Beit Hillel, the end of his words, that kli rishon, you're not allowed to add chamin letoch tzonen. That's what he's saying? No, that's not the pshat. Areisha kai. He was referring to the beginning of Beit Hillel's words, which was regarding kli sheini, that Beit Hillel said, we don't make a gezerah. You can add tzonen letoch chamin by kli sheini, unlike Beit Shammai. And on that, uBeit Hillel matirin by kli sheini ben chamin letoch tzonen uben tzonen letoch chamin. That's what Beit Hillel said. You can even add tzonen letoch chamin by kli sheini. And on that, Rabbi Shimon ben Yosi, he's saying no, you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin by kli sheini. Tzonen letoch chamin, you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin. Now, what's the obvious question, which Matan just pointed out? If Nachman paskins like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, and if Shimon ben Menasya seems to come out, then who is he following? Beit Shammai or Beit Shammai? The problem is, usually, we try to paskin like Beit Hillel over Beit Shammai. The way you're understanding Shimon ben Menasya now is that he's paskining like Beit Shammai, that we do make a gezerah by kli sheini. You can't add tzonen letoch chamin. So Lema Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya dama ke Beit Shammai. We're going to say that Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya holds like Beit Shammai. So the Gemara says, no, you didn't understand properly. Hachi ka'amar. This is what Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya means to say. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya means to say, lo nechliku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel b'davar zeh. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel aren't arguing in this case. Very interesting. There's a machloket. What is the argument Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel? Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya is saying, you thought they were arguing by kli sheini? They don't argue by kli sheini. They don't argue. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya holds, that's what we're really saying is, Beit Hillel agrees to Beit Shammai, by kli sheini, you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin. So really the third opinion in the Braita is not really a separate third opinion, it's a second opinion in what the machloket is.
So he's cholek on both.
So he's explaining both. What does it mean? It comes out like this. The simple way to understand, which the Tanakama understands, is they're cholek by kli sheini.
So you can't add
one second. That Tanakama, the first way to learn is they're arguing by kli sheini that Beit Shammai holds you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin, and Beit Hillel holds you could because there's no gzeira. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya says no, that's not pshat. They actually agree by kli sheini. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya says that you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin because of the gzeira. So really, Shimon ben Menasya is not being cholek on Beit Shammai or Beit Hillel. He's being cholek on the Tanakama. There's the first opinion of the Braita who explains Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel are arguing, and kli sheini, and Shimon ben Menasya is cholek and says they're not arguing. I'm going to erase this and I want to put those down so we get that clear, because that's the maskana, the way we're going to come out. Comes out is like this. We have two opinions in terms of what is the machloket gufa. We have Tanakama, which is the beginning author of the Braita, and we have Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. So Tanakama holds yesh machloket the kli sheini, which is that Beit Shammai oser tzonen letoch chamin uBeit Hillel matirin. Okay, that's the Tanakama's opinion. However, Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya holds no, in machloket. In machloket, shteihem
matirim
osrim. They both make the gzera. They both say you're not allowed to put tzonen letoch chamin by kli sheini. And then Rav Nachman says, we pass him like Rav Shimon ben Menasya. What does he really mean to say? That the machloket is understood as Rav Shimon ben Menasya, that there's no machloket. They both hold it's asur, like Beit Shammai, they make a gzera. So like this. But we're coming out now, lefi zeh, would come out that even with kli sheini, Rav Shimon ben Menasya understands that Beit Hillel would agree there is a gzera, you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin. By kli sheini even. Okay, by kli sheini, that's what we're coming out.
What is it?
Comes out like this. According to the Tanakama, the first way to understand is machloket. You poured water from the pot into a kli sheini. Now you have a kli sheini. Can you put cold water into that? So Beit Shammai says don't, because if you do into that, you might add into the kli rishon. Gzera, fine. Beit Hillel says no gzera. This is not going to cook because it's kli sheini. You could put tzonen letoch chamin. Machloket. Shimon ben Menasya says no. They agree that there's a gzera, and Beit Hillel agrees to Beit Shammai, you're not allowed to add tzonen letoch chamin even by kli sheini. That's what comes out. But let's continue now. So the Gemara now tells us Now the Gemara tells us a story like this. Amar Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua. Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua says, story. Now this is the psak. This just seems to be. It's a story, so it's halakha.
I read the halakha once because somebody told me I drink hot water in Shabbat before shul, and I add some cold water.
Correct.
He told me you can't do it. I said it's mutar.
Kli sheini.
It's kli sheini, and there is no bishul be kli sheini.
Amar Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua. Chazina le Rava. We saw Rava de lo kapid amana. Maze lo kapid amana. He wasn't makpid. He wasn't careful on mana. Mana is a kli sheini. Okay. Now what does it mean? He wasn't careful. Midetani abichia. Now what it means is that he would add cold water to a kli sheini that had hot water in it. He would add cold water. Now how do we know that? So just to point out, as we're about to show, is that there's a braita, Rabbi Chia teaches, that seems to be the psak is like Tanakama, is that, no, there is a machloket, and Beit Hillel holds you could add cold water to hot water if it's a kli sheini. Midetani Rabbi Chia, because Rabbi Chia taught in a braita, noten adam kiton shel mayim letoch sefel shel mayim, you are allowed to add kiton shel mayim. Now kiton is a flask, it's like a cup of water, of cold water, letoch sefel shel mayim, into a container of hot water. You are allowed to. Why are you allowed to? Because the sefel shel mayim is a kli sheini, and putting in the cold water is tonen letoch chamin of kli sheini, and therefore it's like the Tanakama that Beit Hillel holds it's mutar, that they don't agree to Beit Shammai, like Tanakama says. Ben chamin letoch tzonen or ben tzonen letoch chamin. Even if it's tzonen letoch chamin, it's mutar. Now, the Gemara says it's not really a proof necessarily, because that's a unique case. What was that case? You took a kiton of cold water. It's a little drop, but it's in something. It's closed in something, and then you put it into the hot water. So he says
you dipped
it, you immersed it, so that you didn't pour it in. That's what we're understanding. So the Gemara says, but maybe that's different. Maybe where you put it in, since there's walls of the kli, it's mafsik. Maybe that doesn't cook it. But maybe if you pour it in, it would be a problem.
What's the difference? It's kli sheini.
The difference is that maybe there is a gzeira when you're pouring it in, but not when you put it in immersed in the kli. Maybe the braita is different. The mifsak kli, that the kli is separating between the waters outside that are hot and the waters inside that are cold. But maybe really it's asur to pour it in. No. We had the girsa was ma'aret. You're allowed to pour the cold water into the hot water because it's a kli sheini. You are allowed to pour the cold water into the kli sheini. And therefore the Gemara seems to paskin psak is you're allowed to put cold water into a kli sheini of hot water, again, because really there is a machloket, like the Tanakama said, not like a Shifman ben Menasya, and Beit Hillel holds you're allowed to pour cold water into a bowl of hot water that's a kli sheini, like your case, probably, and therefore they're not agreeing there's actually a heter for that. So the way we're coming out, the way the Tanakama is explaining, is that let's just go over the steps here. When it comes to, actually let me tell you, Art School does a good job here. I want to read through it. I know. I had to. So let's just go through it. He goes through very nicely. Let's go through it here. It goes like this. Let's summarize. It's like this. Cold water into a ambati, a kli rishon. Asur lekulei alma. Lekulei alma. Everybody agrees it's asur, that's a bishul problem. Okay?
Because
kli rishon.
Shata
gavar, exactly, and that's a kli rishon. You're cooking the cold water on top. Beautiful. Hot water into a cold kli rishon. What's that? Like hot water into a cold kli rishon.
Bet Shammai asur, Bet Hillel mutar.
No.
מה זה כלי ראשון בcold water?
A bath, a cold bath. Hot water into a kli rishon. Hot water into a kli rishon.
Bet Shammai asur.
Hot water into a cold bath, into a kli rishon. Everyone holds it's mutar. Everyone holds it's mutar. It's not bishul. Not bishul. Because again, tata gava, what does it mean? Whatever the temperature of the bottom thing is overpowers, and therefore it's not bishul. Now, pouring hot water into a kli sheini of cold water, what's the halacha in that case? Hot into a cold of a kli sheini.
Bet Shammai asur, Bet Hillel.
No. One second. Hot water into a cold kli sheini. It's mutar. It's mutar.
Okay.
Mutar. Everybody holds it's mutar. Now, this is where there's machloket.
What's the difference kli rishon kli sheini?
That's the same. That's in the same. If it's cold, just understand. The fourth case is where there's a machloket. This is the machloket, pouring cold water into a kli sheini of hot water. This is the machloket. So let's speak it out. According to the Tanakama, this is a case of a machloket. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai makes a gzera, you're not allowed to because you might do it in kli rishon. Beit Hillel says no gzera. Okay? According to Rishon ben Menasya, both Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel agree that it's asur. The Gemara seems to come out, Rav is doing, and we have Braita like Rabbi Chia that says, this is mutar because there is a machloket, the Beit Hillel holds it's mutar.
This is mutar because...
That's what seems to come out. What? Rava was doing it, and we have a Braita, Rabbi Chia, that you're allowed to pour cold water into the hot water
in a kli sheini.
Exactly. That's what seems to be.
Exactly.
Good? Clear? Be very clear. Comes out very clear.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. That comes out very good. One second.
כוח הכלל של הדגר, האמבטי החם גובר על המים הצוננים בשלם. ב' לשפוך מי אמבטי חמים לאמבטי של צוננים. תלוי בשני דרכים של הראשונים בסוגיות הגמרא. פירוש התוספות בית שמאי ובית הלל מתירים רבי שמעון מנסה לסב. והלכה כרבי שמעון מנסה לאסור. So why say that כהלכה כרבי שמעון מנסה לאסור? לשפוך מי אמבטי חמים לאמבטי של צוננים. תלוי בשני דרכים של הראשונים בסוגיות הגמרא. לפירוש התוספות בית שמאי ובית הלל מתירים. ורבי שמעון מנסה אוסר. לפי התוספות. והלכה כרבי שמעון מנסה לאסור.
Okay, that's interesting to see.
לפירוש הריף מותר לעשות, כן, לדעת הכל. ג' מותר לשפוך מים חמים לכוס של צוננים, על פי הכלל שתחתון עובר.
יאללה, we'll stop את המשנה. בעזרת השם. Take up a new Mishnah tomorrow.
לשפוך מים צוננים.
A few minutes.
שהוא כלי שני. פירוש התוספות בית שמאי מסור בית הלל.
בעזרת השם.
בית הלל. בית שמאי מסור בית הלל.
Tomorrow is already Friday, ברוך השם.
מותר לעשות כן לפי שנוהג רבה.
Okay, we're stopping the bottom in Bet Amud Aleph, the Mishnah. Tomorrow, talk about frying pan, pots, good stuff.